Gosh, there's such a warm, beautiful vibe here, but I'm going to go with the roller coaster that the gospel gives us. I don't know if you know of the American poet Tony Hoagland, New Mexico. Here's a little poem, Reasons to Survive November. November, like a train wreck, as if a locomotive made of cold had hurtled out of Canada and crashed into a million trees, flaming the leaves, setting the woods on fire. The sky is a thick, cold gauze. But there's a soup special at the Waffle House downtown, and the Jack Parsons show is up at the museum, full of luminous red barns. Or maybe I'll visit beautiful Donna, the kickboxing queen from Santa Fe, and roll around in her fold-out bed. I know there are some people out there who think I'm supposed to end up in a room by myself with a gun, a locked door, and my slack mouth open like a disconnected phone. But I hate those people back.
And don't be salty. And the hatred makes me
kill them, so I shove joy like a knife into my own heart over and over, and I force myself toward pleasure. And I love this November life where I run like a train deeper and deeper into the land of my enemies. Yeah, it's kind of dark, sorry. In November, our part of the planet leans into a kind of grand scale seasonal nightfall and bedtime with shortening daylight and long dark evenings and nights. This time calls for, in the Northern Hemisphere, harvesting, storing, snuggling, conserving, contemplating. Long before we had Safeway or New Seasons or worldwide supply chain, the last of the summer berries were prepared as jars of jams and preserves. Vegetables were gently cooked and put up for the winter. The wood for fires cut and collected. The quilts brought down from the attic or up from the undercroft. As crops reached their peak production, the field seemed to die, and the rest was cooked for harvest. And we humans couldn't help but imagine our own diminishment and death, our temporal disappearance and our eternal destiny. Part of my fabulous pedigree was I spent 14 years as a Roman Catholic Benedictine monk in Minnesota. And November meant hauling in beautiful bushel baskets of autumn's apples to the stone cellars, but it also meant to dig a few graves each November before the ground froze and fill them with straw should they be needed during the winter. Experience had taught the monks that bodily death might not wait until the frozen earth begins to soften in the spring. So the natural order preaches to human hearts, teaching us to observe signs, not as fearsome triggers, but as gentle, though urgent, prompts toward deeper living. And again, to keep it real, even if it were the bright summer solstice today, events in our local, national, and international spheres give us pause. I was asked to come and speak about Gaza, which I will do after the service. But think about Gaza or the larger Middle East or Sudan or South Sudan or Yemen or Haiti or Mali, where people are starving. Think of the people on our streets, our economy, our precarious rule of law, our seemingly precarious democratic and human ideals, our dear planet herself. In the face of dispossession, exile, mass killing, forced starvation, terror, and humiliation, how does one keep hope alive if one dare hope at all? I sometimes look at the commentaries on the Sunday Scriptures by Sister Verna, Benedictine in Australia, and she just says it clearly. At times, we seem to be citizens of a rather random, chaotic, and disordered world, desperately in need of encouragement and hope. Will there be a springtime bringing renewed energy and life? And what will it look like? How will it echo or even mirror what has passed? I mean, you heard Isaiah today. The former things, we're not even going to think of them. I'm about to create something new, but can't quite see it or feel it this November. And then looking at our own lives, what have I got left? What will be preserved? What will be cut and left behind? And what might bloom anew in the spring? Is there, in fact, resurrection? Or, please God, something like it to clear the wreckage piled up from my own bad decisions and my own ignorance and fear? So, as Sara said, we're coming to the end of the liturgical year, and the tone really has turned. And from now till Christmas, the church watches as so many signs of life and light seem to fade and slip from us. Last time I was here, I was singing the praises of your patron, more as evangelist than physician. And so we've got our last 2 weeks with Luke before we move to Matthew for a year. At the time Luke wrote this vignette of Jesus speaking to the people who are gawking at the beauty of the temple and its adornments, remember that when Luke wrote it, the Romans had already reduced the temple to rubble about a dozen years before, in the year 70. And that's what Luke's community knew. Even if they were far away, they knew that the temple in Jerusalem was wasted. And the militant occupying Romans in Luke's time were not keeping peace, but holding down rebellion with sheer force. And less than a generation after Luke wrote these words, the whole of Jerusalem would be annihilated in the year 134. So here, when we read it in the gospel, Jesus seems to predict what Luke's community already knows has happened. Jesus tells them and tells us not to get freaked out, but warns against opportunists who will claim leadership in his name, but in fact are only concerned in exploiting people when they're most frightened and vulnerable. Do not be deceived or be panicked because of prophets of doom. Jesus is not forecasting the end of the world, but is urging his followers to have confidence in God. Not a hair of your head shall perish. Have confidence in God in the face of the tough demands of theirs and our present and future discipleship that is for the world. And then Paul warns the Thessalonians kind of in a different way, kind of odd way. He says, don't be busybodies and don't just sit around doing nothing, even though that community thought the end of the world was coming really in their lifetime. They would see it. Paul reminds them, think about now, who we are now, who we're with now, and not give in to a paralyzing fascination with the end time at the expense of active involvement in the present. That's Sister Verna speaking again. A way of life that does not contribute to the building up of the community weakens the community. this is timeless advice, especially when we're getting wigged out about world events. I'm just sticking this in because I believe it deeply, and it relates to what I'll be speaking about afterwards, and what I think is a necessary prism as we look at the Gospels. I grew up thinking that there were boutique Christianities. You could be a social justice Christian, you could be a contemplative Christian, you could be this or that. I think there's one Christianity with many elements, and one that gets neglected, that was treated often as a little boutique specialty for those people, is nonviolence. And I just want to quote our friend and patron Luke twice, and this isn't a theological proof for nonviolence, but these are two things that I can't let go of. In Luke 9, the disciples are making their great journey from Galilee south to Jerusalem for the final self-sacrifice of Jesus. And they're going through a Samaritan village. And the Samaritan village doesn't have much time for Jesus and the disciples. So James and John, big brave guys, they said, they didn't receive us. Should we call down fire from heaven and blast them away? And Jesus is like, oh, keep moving. Nonviolence, even in the face of rejection. And then tiny words, Luke 22 in the Garden of Gethsemane, right after Judas betrays him and delivers him over, the disciples get all brave again. Lord, shall we strike with a sword? Then one of them struck the slave of the high priest and cut off his right ear. But Jesus said, no more of this. I think these two events are as key as the Beatitudes or anything else in our Christian life. No more of this. Absolute nonviolence. Lastly, and I hope this isn't a downer, for me, it's given reality and texture to my faith. Born in Nazareth in 1937 and serving as Anglican bishop in Jerusalem from 1997 to 2007, Bishop Riyah Abu al-Assal said something I've never forgotten. He was speaking to one of my pilgrim groups about the state of the situation in the Holy Land. And then someone asked, Bishop, are you optimistic about the possibility of peace with justice? No, I'm not optimistic. Optimists can always find a reason for hope. I am a Christian. We choose to hope when we cannot find any reason for hope. Christians choose to hope in the dark, damp silence of the tomb. I am not optimistic, he said, but I hope. And I'm not optimistic about Gaza as I have experienced it and as I see it now. But I hope. Let's go back to Mary Oliver at the beginning. There are plenty of lives and whole towns destroyed or about to be. We're not wise and not very often kind, and much can never be redeemed. Still, life has some possibility left. Perhaps this is its way of fighting back, that sometimes something happens better than all the riches or power in the world. Lastly, chapter 24 of Luke's Gospel. the road to Emmaus. That beautiful picture play of what we do every Sunday. Carrying a cloud of desolation, despair, and despondency, the disciples are calling it quits and leaving town. The one we had hoped would redeem has been crucified. He took bread, blessed, and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him.